Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for a model, build and tactics review of the Legio Custodes Contemptor Achillus class Dreadnought. So this is one of two Contemptor Dreadnoughts that are currently available for the Custodian force. As well as this, we also have the Contemptor Galatus, which is the sword and shield armed machine. However, this one is equipped with a Achillus Dreadspear, or to me and you, it's a halberd. Very large and impressive weapon. So what I'm going to do in this review is I'm going to talk about the kit and the assembly of this model, and then I'm going to go on to talk about the tactics and in-game use. Let's begin by having a look at the model. So the first thing that grabs me for sure is the incredibly fine detail that's present on this model. And this comes in the form of all the filigree that sits atop its various armoured sections. And then in addition, we have this very finely detailed chest pauldron with one of the most impressive renditions of an Imperial Eagle I've ever seen. So let's have a look at a close-up of some of these. So yeah, I mean, there's a bas-relief double eagle head on this. It really is impressive. Very nice. And we have a custodian insignia on the pauldron. There is a laurel wreath on the Dreadnought's head, and a very different style of armour to normal Contemptor Dreadnoughts. And then there's these elaborate eagle symbols woven into the greaves. Then we also have what is probably the precursor to the Crux Terminatus system worn by Terminator Marines. Very nice. So an interesting thing with this Dreadnought, it's very different to normal Marine Dreadnoughts. It has a proportioned set of hands relative to the rest of the Dreadnought. And these look very finely articulated and dexterous. And these are a strong contrast to the enormous power claws and power fists of Marine Dreadnoughts, or indeed the fact that a lot of Dreadnoughts don't have a manipulator arm, they just have a large weapon instead. This is a much more elegant machine. The Achillus Dreadspear also has some fine detailing on it. And another nice eagle head device here, big sharp spike there, and some more filigree on the main blade, atop of which sits the las pulsar. So if we continue around the model, very intricate armour style. The filigree crops up in all sorts of locations, and the armour torso wraps around the power pack. Everything feels very tightly built in, and this, I mean, you know, looking at this made me think of Renaissance era suits of armour, the very tight fitting and ornate and sophisticated design. So there is a clear parallel in the design front there, if you ask me. And there is a double-headed eagle atop the torso. So a very finely detailed miniature indeed, and you can see the filigree extending around the side of the torso there as well. Yeah, a very finely detailed miniature, and certainly an impressive addition to a force. Okay, so let's talk about the construction. So this is a brand new Forge kit. It's the smallest kit thus far to come with a full colour set of instructions, which is a nice addition, and it also comes in its own white box, which is good. The instructions are pretty decent. They show you where everything goes. A couple of watch outs is to make sure everything is, a lot of the parts are single side, even some that look very similar. And for example, the elbow cop, there is a left and a right one, and there's not a lot of difference between them. So yeah, do check for that. One thing this doesn't do is it doesn't give you some advice around constructing, in particular, double-handed poses, because there are some articulation concerns to be aware of, and I'll come to that in a moment. But yeah, good set of instructions. It articulates the general construction well. Let's talk about my build. So you may have watched my time-lapse build. I filmed the assembly of this Dreadnought. In itself, it's a pretty straightforward build. Things will get more complicated if you want to adopt more unusual and dynamic poses, and in particular doing double-handed holds on the Dreadspear. In terms of pinning, well, I mean I like to pin my models for strength. last thing I would want is one of these to break. So I've put pin running from foot through the greave into the thigh on both sides, so a long pin, a pin that runs across the hips and through the pelvis section, a pin between the hip and the lower chest, and then there's also pins between the upper arm and the lower arm. Other joints such as the chest joint, the shoulders, and all the detail and stuff I didn't pin. It wasn't necessary, they were strong enough as they were. I always pin to ensure that the model's very strong. You could build it without pinning. So build advice. Now there is some build advice on this. Now when I said that this Dreadnought looks like a fine suit of Renaissance era armour, unfortunately it doesn't benefit from having the superb articulation that you would expect of such a suit. And if you're accustomed to making Contemptor Dreadnoughts from Forge World, this model doesn't have the same range of posability, particularly in the legs, and these large greaves restrict movement considerably. When I was posing this, I found I couldn't get the same sort of range of motion that I could get on a Contemptor Dreadnought in the legs, and also the waist area is very tight as well. So what you can do is, these greaves, sections inside them are fairly thick, and you can actually shave away a bit of material inside. I mean, I did it down here, you can't see because it's subtly done, to allow me to get this foot out a bit further. Likewise, once I'd posed the hips, the lower torso didn't fit quite, so I heated it up and just squeezed. Once it was warm, the base of it, I just squeezed it on, and it just bent the underside of these pipes a touch, or created an imprint of a filigree into them that allowed it to seat properly. So there's various tricks you can use like that to try and increase the range of motion, but it does feel to me to be a bit more constrained in terms of opposability on the legs in particular, and the torso compared to a Contemptor. The arms on the other hand are a different matter, and they are very well articulated, and they articulate like human limbs. And you got a ball joint, you got the shoulder that moves in and out, you've got this rotational elbow joint, and then you've got a bending elbow joint, and then finally you can position the hand as well. So an excellent range of motion on those limbs, although you are somewhat restricted nonetheless by the top of these large pauldrons. Now here's a watch out for you with the build. The wrist mounted weapons, and this isn't made clear in the instructions, if you do a pose like this, which is a natural human articulation pose for holding a double-handed blade like this, and you notice how I've positioned the arms, and that is a very natural human style position, and I presume as this is modelled on a human, it articulates in just the same way. Well, the model certainly does. The problem you encounter is the wrist mounted weapons. So here you have a twin-linked Adrathic Destructor. Oh, and that's the wrong side. When you seat that, it's actually, it kind of gets in the way of the halberd, yeah? I'm going to magnetize these. And then on the other side, well, this one just simply doesn't fit because of the halberd being in the way. And in the instructions, there isn't anything really there to warn you about this restriction. I'm going to have to do some work there to get those to fit. That is a watch out if you do assemble one of these guys. A top tip around, or my top tip for assembling this is, I mean, obviously tack all your bits to test your pose out, but on the spear, which I've not stuck on, so I'm going to magnetize this, on these hands, just glue the hand, the fingers on, and then leave it in motion around the blade, and that will help you with posing the actual weapon. The reason why I'm going to magnetize this is firstly from a transport perspective, but secondly from a weapon option point of view as well. And I'll just show you with one fist. So here you get an alternate fist. There you go. And in the army, you don't actually, the Dreadspear is actually a weapon option. So you can just take the Achillus with a pair of fists and the forearm mounted weapons as a lower cost Dreadnought option. So yeah, so that's well worth considering in terms of if you're interested in sort of adaptability conversions on your miniatures, magnetizing these wrists. I mean, I'm going to come back to that, so I had to order some magnets to do it. I'll come back and I'll do a video on magnetizing the wrists on this guy. Okay, spare parts. You get a good amount of spare parts in this kit. You get 2 alternate feet. So you get tiptoe feet, or where he's on the ball of his foot. And you could use that for creating different poses. You get a full set of wrist mounted weapons. So you get the Adrathic Destructors. So these are your 30k disintegrator guns, very powerful. You get a pair of Lastrum Stormbolters, and you also get a pair of Infernus Incinerators as well. And then, as I mentioned, you get alternative hands. So you get the hand grasping the Dreadspear for the left and right side. You get a fist, and then you get an open hand as well. So yeah, an excellent selection of spare parts there. And if you enjoy the magnetisation side of things, the spare weapons are very good. So yes, overall it's a very impressive miniature. Your mileage will probably vary in terms of how tricky it is to pose, depending on how dynamic a pose you want to go for. Kit quality on this was excellent. This was bought on just at the point of release. I got a very good copy. I mean, there were a few bits of filling to do, but no mold slips of note. Although I would recommend, do carefully check your parts, because of all this fine filigree detail. Any mold slips are going to have a significant effect if they cross that detail. Let's do a couple of quick size comparisons. Firstly, let's compare it against the obvious Space Marine. So here we have a dude from the Iron Hands armed with a Volkite Caliver. And if we stand him alongside, the Achilles is a big chappy. Yeah, it's a big fella. And the obvious comparator, of course, is to range this against a standard Contemptor Dreadnought. So here we have such a person, and it's basically the same size as a standard Contemptor. This guy stood on this mound, so it's a bit taller. Let's bring in a slightly larger operator. So here we've got the Radio Dreadnought. Yeah, it's sized accordingly. So yeah, so I guess it's what you expect size-wise. Let's move on to talk about the rules and the tactics. This is part of the Talons of the Emperor list, and my rules are sourced from Book 7 Inferno. The Achilles sits in the elite slot, and it's a single unit for the slot. It costs 200 points, and it is weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 5, strength 8, front and side armour is 13, rear armour is 11, initiative 5, attacks 4, and hull points are 3. It's a vehicle walker. It comes equipped with 2 Dreadnought close combat weapons with inbuilt Lastrum Stormbolters, smoke launchers, a searchlight, a refractor field, interesting, and extra armour. And it has special rules of fleet, move through cover, and counterattack. So quite basic straight up, although its standard abilities synergize well with those of the Custodian Guard. It's got the same sort of capabilities in terms of the movement front. Now, it has a few options for weapons. So it can, for 40 points, you can buy an Achillus Dreadspear with an inbuilt Corvée Las Pulsar for 40 points. And then you can replace either of the Lastrum Stormbolters with the following weapons: a twin-linked Adrathic Destructor at 15 points a go, or a single Infernus Incinerator for 5 points. So let's talk about the 40-point upgrade, because this is generally, I think, what people will take. Dreadspear, let's talk about its range capabilities first. So the Corvée Las Pulsar is a pocket las cannon. It's only short ranged at 36 inches. However, it's got the same normal hitting power. It's strength 9 AP2. However, it gets D3 shots a turn. So that means, on average, you're getting 2 las cannon shots out of this guy. So that's decent firepower. And coupled with the Dreadnought's ballistic skill of 5, means it, in terms of shooting capability, it compares very well to a Mortis Contemptor Dreadnought, and certainly a standard Contemptor Dreadnought. It's a powerful unit. Compared to the difference in capability between Custodians and Space Marines and Contemptor Dreadnoughts, the Achilles, it it isn't the enormous qualitative advantage that custodians represent over Space Marines. As a matter of fact, it's only marginally more potent in many areas, and particularly in melee. So you're not getting the same step up in quality that you get with custodians compared to Marines with this, compared to a Contemptor. So its advantages over a normal Contemptor are subtle, but they are there, and let's just think about them. Well, obviously its combat skills are very high, weapon skill 6 and ballistic skill 5. Strength is high at 8, so the equivalent of 5 and Dreadnought. Side armour of 13 means you don't have to worry about some shots that a normal Contemptor would do, and also that rear armour of 11 makes it proof against small arms fire like bolt guns. Initiative 5 means that you'll always strike first, and attacks 4, as the rules are written, means that it actually is on a basic attack stat of 5 because it comes equipped with 2 Dreadnought close combat weapons. So yeah, so this thing on the charge has 6 attacks. However, hull points at 3 are just normal, so nothing particularly overly tough there. It's a little bit more survivable in close combat on account of its refractor field as opposed to an adamantic shield, and it's obviously got, you know, the sophisticated custodian weapons. I guess the real strength in this sits in the Dreadspear and its melee ability, and so it's strength 10 and AP 2, it is master crafted, and it has a special rule called impaling. And what this means, if you roll to hit on a 6 on the turn you assault, the strength becomes D, so that is extremely potent, and that coupled with the fact that, as I read it, you've got 6 attacks on the charge, because note, it is not a specialist weapon, so you still get the benefits of having 2 close combat weapons. You have a pretty decent chance of inflicting a D hit on the turn you charge with this thing, so it makes it a threat to just about everything. So the only Dreadnought you really need to fear in melee, of course, is the Leviathan Dreadnought, and that should be treated with healthy respect because its enhanced adamantic shielding does give it an edge against the Achillus in close combat. So what do I think about this? Well, in terms of tactical use, well, I think it's a good all-round Dreadnought. It's very potent in melee. It fits with the Custodes' strong on the charge combat style. The Las Pulsar gives it excellent anti-tank capability at range. And if you choose, then you've got a whole variety of decent secondary weapons. So the Lastrum Stormbolters are potent. You can turn it into an absolute beast of an anti-tank Dreadnought with the addition of the Adrathic Destructors. Then the Infernus Incinerator will make it a terrifying opponent to try assault in melee. A real all-rounder. It also, I mean, it's very hard hitting as well in melee, and it's harder hitting than the Galatas Dreadnought. However, the Galatas Dreadnought can pump out more attacks and is more survivable and is better against infantry. This thing is better against armoured opponents, such as tanks and other Dreadnoughts. You can also just leave a Dreadspear off and equip it with, and you've actually got a bargain basement, if you will, Custodian Dreadnought, which, you know, might be something that you want to consider if you're struggling to get the points into the list, because even without the Dreadspear, with its high strength stat of 8 and wrist-mounted weapons, it is still a formidable close-range adversary. And perhaps if you're going for the teleporter combo with Constantine Valdor, that might be quite a useful way of deploying such a Dreadnought without the Dreadspear. So yes, anyway, there you have it. That is my review of the Legio Custodes Contemptor Achillus Dreadnought. Fantastic model. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know what you think of this brand new addition to the Custodian line. Thank you very much for watching. I will speak to you next time, and goodbye.